In the distant reaches of the galaxy, humanity had long been considered a mere blip on the radar of galactic civilization. A young species, primitive compared to the ancient empires that spanned the stars, humanity had once been the underdogs of the cosmos. The other races looked upon them with disdain, seeing their history of violence, war, and technological adolescence as evidence of their inherent weakness. They were outcasts, left behind in the grand scheme of things, struggling for survival on their backwater planet. But there were always those who defied the expectations of their time, those whose determination and resilience could never be easily dismissed. In the year 2439, something remarkable happened that would change the course of history. Humanity, the species once cast aside, was poised to take its place among the giants of the galaxy. It began with the discovery of the Omnicon, a mysterious alien artifact buried beneath the ice of Europa. The device had been dormant for millennia, its origin unknown, but its purpose clear. It contained the key to advanced technology that far surpassed anything humanity had developed on its own. This discovery ignited a chain reaction, catapulting humanity to the forefront of the galactic stage. For decades, humans had struggled to gain the trust of the galactic empires, but with the Omnicon's technology, they quickly gained the upper hand. Their ships, once crude and fragile, became sleek, powerful warships. Their weapons, once primitive, could now shatter entire fleets with ease. But the most important aspect of this newfound power was something far more intangible: their will. While the other races of the galaxy had grown complacent, stuck in their ancient ways, humanity's relentless drive to improve and conquer had given them the edge. They weren't bound by centuries-old traditions or the weight of their own history. They were a species driven by the belief that they could always be better. That drive had led them to the stars, and now it was taking them even further. Humanity's first major military campaign was against the Xerics, a powerful, insectoid species that had long held dominion over the Outer Rim. The Xerics had a formidable fleet, and they were quick to dismiss humanity as little more than a nuisance. They sent a fleet to wipe them out, confident in their superiority. The humans, however, had learned to never underestimate the power of the underdog. The Xerics fleet entered the system, expecting to overwhelm the human defenses with ease. Instead, they encountered a well-coordinated defense, something they hadn't anticipated from a species they considered primitive. The humans had studied their enemies in great detail, learning their tactics, their weaknesses, and their strengths. They knew exactly how to fight them, and they fought with a ferocity that surprised even their own leaders. Human ships, equipped with the advanced weaponry from the Omnicon, tore through the Xerics fleet like a blade through paper. The once invincible insectoids found themselves trapped in a series of devastating ambushes, their ships picked off one by the human superior tactics and weaponry. The battle was over in hours, and the Xerics fleet was decimated. The survivors, battered and broken, retreated in fear. Humanity had not only defended itself but had proven that it was no longer an outcast. It was a force to be reckoned with. This victory sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The other races, who had long viewed humanity as little more than a footnote in the annals of galactic history, now had to reckon with the fact that the humans were no longer the weak, divided species they once were. They were conquerors. But the victory over the Xerics was only the beginning. Humanity's ambitions were far greater. The galaxy was vast, and there were many more empires to be toppled, many more worlds to claim. But the most difficult battle of all lay ahead, convincing the rest of the galaxy that humanity's rise was no fluke. They would need allies, yes, but they would also need to prove that their conquest was not just a victory of technology, but of sheer will. As humanity's fleet gathered for their next campaign, new, unshakable belief began to take hold: they were no longer outcasts. They were the future. And that future was theirs to shape. The galaxy hummed with uneasy whispers following humanity's victory over the Xerics. As news spread, the question that lingered in the minds of every galactic leader was the same: who were these humans? The Xerics had been a formidable foe, but now humanity had proven itself capable of defeating them in battle, wielding technology that no one had expected them to possess. The outcasts were no more. The Iron Armada, as the humans' newly formed fleet was called, was a testament to their transformation. It was an armada of sleek, fearsome warships that carried not just weapons, but a symbol: humanity had arrived. But victory brought complications. The Xerics had been a significant power, but they were not the only force to reckon with in the galaxy. In the aftermath of their defeat, the Council of the Galactic Concord, an alliance of powerful civilizations, saw humanity's rise as both a challenge and a potential threat. The leader of the Concord, a towering figure known as Supreme Overlord Eros, was the first to publicly acknowledge humanity's sudden ascent. The Overlord was a being of immense intellect, his species having ruled over much of the galaxy for millennia. He had overseen countless conflicts, and he knew that the unexpected rise of humanity could either be a boon or a disaster. If humanity was allowed to expand unchecked, it could upset the delicate balance of power that had kept the galaxy in a tense peace for generations. Eros, however, was not one to act impulsively. He sought a more calculated approach, sending his envoy to meet with the humans. A delegation from the Galactic Concord arrived at Earth, a planet that had once been on the verge of extinction during the wars of humanity's distant past. The humans, now unified under a single government, greeted them with a show of force, their fleets poised in orbit above the planet. Captain Arya Moore, the commander of the Iron Armada's flagship Vanguard, stood at the helm, watching as the Concord envoy's ships descended toward Earth. She was a striking figure, a former combat officer who had risen through the ranks on the strength of her tactical brilliance and fierce loyalty to her people. Her eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the incoming vessels, knowing that the moment of truth had arrived. The human delegation welcomed the Concord representatives to a grand hall within the capital, where both sides stood in tense silence. Eros's envoy, led by the dignified ambassador Xeron, was composed of members from various species, each with their own cultural practices and histories. They sat at the long table, their eyes locked on the humans seated opposite them. Ambassador Xeron was the first to speak, his voice smooth and diplomatic. "We come in peace, but we come with caution. The Xerics, our allies for centuries, have been defeated, and the galaxy is now left to wonder what the true intentions of humanity are. We have seen your power, but we must know, what do you want?" Arya Moore stood, her presence commanding. "We seek nothing more than what was rightfully ours: respect, autonomy, and the right to chart our own course. You may call us outcasts, but we are the future of this galaxy. Humanity will no longer be an afterthought. We will shape the stars, not cower beneath them." There was an eerie silence. The Concord envoys exchanged glances, calculating their next move. The truth was, they were wary of humanity's potential. The humans had shown their might, but the Concord was a web of complex treaties and alliances that could not be undone by a single victory. Still, the idea of a new power rising was something that could not be ignored. Ambassador Xeron cleared his throat. "We have witnessed your strength, but your methods are unconventional. The Concord seeks harmony, balance. We fear that your path will lead to conflict, and war will consume the galaxy once more." Arya smiled, a grim expression that barely hinted at her true thoughts. "Balance? Harmony? Those words mean nothing when your power comes at the expense of others. We won't be your subjects. We won't bow to the old ways of thinking. The galaxy has always been ruled by the strongest, and humanity will prove that it is strong enough to lead." The tension in the room was palpable. But the message was clear: humanity would not be swayed by empty promises of peace. The galaxy would either bend to humanity's will, or it would face the consequences. Outside, in the void of space, the Iron Armada hovered like a storm, waiting for the moment to strike. They would not be content with negotiations. Humanity had long endured the scorn of the galaxy's elites, and now they were prepared to rise as the true masters of the stars. The Galactic Concord's leaders could either accept humanity's power or face a new order entirely. The game had changed. The question now was no longer whether humanity would survive, it was whether the rest of the galaxy would. As humanity's fleet, the Iron Armada, stood poised on the edge of the galaxy, ready for their next move, the Galactic Concord had been thrown into turmoil. The unsettling encounter with the humans left many of the Concord's leaders divided. Some saw humanity's rise as an opportunity, an ally that could tip the balance of power in their favor against rivals like the formidable Karzak Empire. Others saw the humans as a direct threat to their centuries-old dominance and feared that if left unchecked, they would spark a galaxy-wide war. Supreme Overlord Eros was not one to be easily intimidated. Behind his calm exterior, he was a calculating strategist, and he understood that humanity's rise could not be ignored. But to maintain control, he needed to act decisively. It wasn't long before the first covert operations against humanity began. Deep within the shadowy reaches of the galaxy, factions within the Galactic Concord began to stir. Small rebel cells, dissatisfied with the Concord's authority, saw the humans as the perfect catalyst for change. They believed that a new power was rising in the galaxy, one that could bring about a revolutionary shift, where the Concord's ancient rulers would be toppled, and the galaxy could be divided among the people. These insurgents began making contact with the human faction, seeking to form alliances that could undermine the galactic elite. On the fringes of human-controlled space, a fleet of rogue ships, under the command of a mysterious leader known only as the Spectre, began intercepting communication channels. The Spectre, a former Concord military officer turned anarchist, had long believed that the only way to bring true freedom to the galaxy was through revolution. Humanity, with its untamed potential and disregard for the old ways, seemed to be the perfect ally. In secret meetings, the Spectre offered humans the chance to strike at the very heart of the Galactic Concord's power, an operation that could send the entire galactic order into chaos. Meanwhile, Captain Aria Moore was becoming increasingly aware of the rising tensions. While humanity's military prowess had earned them enemies, it also had attracted secret supporters. The specter of rebellion hung heavy over the Iron Armada, and Aria knew that not all of it would be friendly. Humanity's ascension had disrupted old power structures, and there were those within the Galactic Concord, perhaps even within their own ranks, who would prefer to see humanity's empire fail. Despite this, Aria's loyalty remained unwavering. She was a soldier first and foremost, and her devotion to her people was unmatched. Still, as she sat at the command center of the Vanguard, staring out at the endless sea of stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to take a darker turn. The question was no longer if the galaxy would resist humanity, it was when. Months passed as tensions between the humans and the Galactic Concord grew. The Concord sent ambassadors, diplomats, and military commanders to Earth in a desperate attempt to ease the rising animosity. But each meeting, each negotiation, was met with the same cold resolve. Humanity had made it clear that they had no intention of bowing to the Concord's demands. It was then that the first signs of rebellion began to surface. Across several key systems in the human-dominated sectors, a series of attacks occurred, sabotaged supply lines, destroyed military installations, and high-profile assassinations of human officials. The signature of these attacks was unmistakable. They were carried out by a rogue faction, led by the Spectre, who sought to sow discord and weaken humanity's hold on its newly conquered territories. Humanity was faced with a choice: crush the rebellion swiftly and maintain control, or allow it to fester and risk the spread of insurrection throughout their empire. It was a delicate balance. Every time humanity gained ground, every time they grew stronger, they seemed to stir the hearts of those who resented their rise. And the rebels were no longer just a small, disorganized force, they were growing in numbers, emboldened by the fear that humanity's conquest would eventually threaten them all. Aria Moore was called to a council with the leaders of humanity's military and political forces. As she entered the war room aboard the Vanguard, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The map of human-controlled space sprawled across the hollow display, showing red dots indicating rebel activity across multiple star systems. Captain Moore, President Elias Ward, humanity's elected leader, said gravely, "We can't ignore this any longer. These rebels are not just a nuisance, they're a threat. If we don't eliminate them now, they'll infect the heart of our empire." Aria nodded, her eyes steely. "We've already been dealing with insurrectionists from the Xerix territories. These rebels are just a symptom of a larger issue. The galaxy doesn't trust us. The Concord is stirring up chaos, and these insurgents are using it to their advantage. Ward looked toward the other leaders in the room. We need a swift response, decisive action to root out these insurgents and show the galaxy that we're in control. Arya was silent for a moment. She had seen the galaxy's politics up close, and she knew that a heavy-handed response could send a signal to the galaxy that humanity was no different from the empires they had once despised. But weakness could be just as dangerous. We don't need to destroy them, she said slowly, her voice filled with determination. We need to show them that we're better than their rebellion. We will fight, yes, but we will offer them a choice. We're not like the Concord. We're not like the Xerics. We'll give them the chance to join us, or face the consequences. Her words struck a chord with the room. The rebels needed to be crushed, but not with the same cruelty that had defined the old galactic powers. Humanity would lead, yes, but it would lead on its own terms. As the meeting concluded, Arya knew that the battle ahead would be the most difficult yet. Humanity had conquered the stars, but now it had to hold on to them, against not just the galactic empires, but against the very forces that sought to tear their empire apart from within. The shadow of rebellion was no longer just a whisper, it was a roar. The decision had been made. Humanity's response to the growing rebellion within its borders would not be one of brute force alone. Arya Moore, as captain of the Iron Armada, understood that this was a delicate moment in the history of their rise. Humanity had fought for its place among the stars, but now it would face its greatest test. Could it maintain its empire without succumbing to the same darkness that had consumed the old powers? The insurgency, led by the Spectre, was no longer just an isolated group of rogue ships. It was spreading, infecting multiple sectors of human-controlled space. Rebel cells were becoming bolder, and the attacks were becoming increasingly coordinated. The peaceful coexistence that humanity had envisioned with its newfound territories was beginning to crack under the pressure of internal division. Captain Moore's first order of business was to launch a full-scale operation to root out the rebels. But this would be no ordinary military campaign. The insurgents were clever, using guerrilla tactics, blending in with local populations, and exploiting the same fear that had made humanity's enemies wary of them. The human fleet was vast and powerful, but the enemy was cunning, and the stakes were higher than ever. Arya stood at the helm of the vanguard as the fleet prepared for deployment. Her mind was sharp, and her resolve unshaken. The rebellion had to be crushed, but she was determined to show the galaxy that humanity would be different from the empires that had come before it. A quick and decisive strike could win the war, but it could also fracture the fragile trust humanity had built with its people. Humanity's rise had been fueled by ambition, yes, but now it was time to prove that their victory wasn't just about power, it was about justice. Prepare the fleet, Arya commanded. We move in 2 hours. We'll strike at the heart of the rebellion, but we'll offer them a chance to surrender. We won't become the monsters they claim we are. Her officers exchanged looks, some doubtful, others resolute. But in Arya, they trusted. She was the embodiment of the humanity they had fought for, determined, unyielding, and yet driven by a belief that they could rise above the brutal ways of the past. The Vanguard and its fleet surged through hyperspace, heading toward the rebellious systems. The first target was the planet Thaler, a crucial mining world that had seen heavy insurgent activity. The Spectre's forces had already begun to rally there, using the planet's dense forests and mountainous terrain to their advantage. As the fleet arrived in orbit, the scope of the situation became clear. On the surface, several cities had been abandoned or were in the midst of chaos. Rebel forces had dug in, fortified by sympathizers within the local population. The message was clear: the rebellion had deep roots. Humanity wasn't just fighting a few scattered ships, they were up against a movement that was quickly gaining momentum. Arya called for a full planetary scan. She needed intelligence before making any moves. As the data poured in, she noted the strange absence of civilian activity in key zones. The rebels had seemingly taken control of several communication hubs, disrupting the planet's ability to contact the outside world. She had expected resistance, but the scale was larger than anticipated. We're going in, Arya decided, her voice calm but firm. Prepare the dropships. We're landing troops in the eastern sector first. We'll neutralize their command posts and secure the planet's primary communication arrays. As humanity's forces descended to the surface, Arya's mind raced. She was no stranger to battle, but this was different. These weren't just enemy soldiers, they were people. People who had been convinced that their only choice was rebellion, who had come to see humanity as another empire, no different from the Concord or the Karzak. Arya's resolve hardened. She would show them the truth. Humanity wasn't like the ancient powers. They would fight for their place in the galaxy, but they would not become the oppressors. The battle was fierce. The insurgents, though technologically inferior, fought with a desperation born of years of oppression. Humanity's soldiers, trained and equipped with the latest technology, held an advantage, but the rebels were willing to die for their cause. As Arya's forces pushed forward, she could feel the tide of battle shifting. But amidst the chaos, something unexpected happened. The Spectre himself appeared on the battlefield. A ghostly figure, cloaked in shadow, his presence more symbol than man, he led the charge against the human forces. Arya had anticipated this. After all, the Spectre had been the mastermind behind the insurgency, a man whose actions had already rocked the foundations of humanity's power. But seeing him in person, seeing the conviction in his eyes, shook her more than she expected. "Captain Moore," the Spectre called out as he approached, his voice carrying through the smoke of the battlefield. "You're nothing but the next in a long line of tyrants, aren't you? Just like the Concord. Just like the Xerics. You will rule with an iron fist, and you will fall the same way they did." Arya's heart pounded. She could feel the weight of his words. He wasn't just an enemy to be defeated, he was the embodiment of everything humanity had fought to overcome. His vision of the galaxy was one of endless cycles of violence, of rulers and rebels, of power and resistance. It was a vision humanity had rejected. "Your fight is meaningless," Arya shouted back, her voice carrying above the din of battle. "We don't want to rule, we want to unite. You're blinded by the past. This galaxy doesn't have to repeat the mistakes of old." The Spectre's eyes narrowed. "You will become like them," he sneered, his voice filled with venom. "And when you do, I'll be there to take you down. The rebellion will never end." The two leaders stood locked in a tense moment, surrounded by chaos, their worlds and beliefs at odds. In that instant, Arya knew that this was more than a battle for a planet, it was a battle for the soul of humanity. Would they succumb to the darkness of tyranny, as so many others had? Or would they rise above it and prove that their conquest was not one of domination, but of freedom? The war was just beginning, and the galaxy was about to be forever changed. The aftermath of the battle on Thaler left a bitter taste in the mouths of humanity's leaders. The insurgency had been dealt a significant blow, with the Spectre's forces routed and the majority of their command structure dismantled. But the victory felt hollow. The rebellion was far from over, and the words of the Spectre echoed in Arya Moore's mind, *, you will become like them, *. The reality of the war had started to set in. Humanity had not just been fighting a rogue faction, they had been fighting an idea, a vision of what they might become. And that vision wasn't one of unity or peace, it was one of power, oppression, and the very same cycle of violence that had plagued the galaxy for eons. Captain Moore, standing at the helm of the Vanguard, stared out into the vast emptiness of space. The Iron Armada was scattered across the galaxy, engaged in skirmishes with insurgents, maintaining a fragile peace between human-controlled territories, and preparing for the inevitable conflict with the Galactic Concord. There was no escaping the fact that humanity's conquest had placed them at the center of an unfolding storm, one that threatened to consume them if they weren't careful. "Captain Moore," came the voice of Commander Lucius Devereaux, her most trusted officer. "We've received communications from the Spectre's faction. They're offering a ceasefire." Arya turned to face him, skeptical. "A ceasefire? After everything we've fought for, they want peace?" "Not peace," Devereaux replied, his voice somber. "They want a truce, a temporary halt in hostilities, so they can talk." The Spectre claims that if we listen to his terms, we can avoid a greater war. But... Devereaux paused, his expression grim. There's something off about this. He's asking for more than just a halt in fighting. He wants a seat at the table. He wants to shape the future of humanity's rule. Arya's fingers curled into fists. This isn't about negotiations. The Spectre wants to tear down everything we've built. He wants to destroy the ideals we stand for. She paced across the command room, her mind working through the implications. The ceasefire was a trap, she was certain of it. The rebellion wasn't simply an external threat, it was a challenge to the very soul of their empire. But there was more to this than just a military decision. Humanity's rise had been fueled by the promise of a new order, one that would break the chains of the old galactic powers. But now, with their grip tightening on the galaxy, humanity had to prove that they were different. They had to prove that their conquest wasn't about domination. It was about unity and a new future, a future that didn't fall into the same traps of the past. I want all intelligence on the Spectre's faction, Arya said, her voice hard. No more games. If he thinks he can dictate terms, he's sorely mistaken. We'll meet him on our terms, or not at all. As Arya turned back to the hollow map of the galaxy, she saw that their position had become even more precarious. The rebellion was spreading like wildfire, with new insurgent groups forming on planets once thought loyal to humanity. The rebels were exploiting every crack, every weakness in humanity's power, fueling the flames of distrust among the people they had conquered. But it wasn't just the rebellion she had to worry about. The Galactic Concord was watching. The diplomatic channels had been silent for weeks, but Arya knew that the old galactic powers were preparing to make their move. The Spectre was just one part of the puzzle, but the real threat was far more complex. Eros and his Concord had never truly accepted humanity's rise. The moment they saw weakness, they would strike. And then there was the matter of the human heart. Arya had seen it firsthand in the soldiers under her command. Some had joined the military out of patriotism, others for personal glory, and still others because they believed in the ideal of a united human race. But in the heat of battle, in the chaos of war, it became clear, the line between liberation and tyranny was razor-thin. Even among her own people, the temptation to dominate, to use their power to control others, was ever present. Humanity had to fight not just its external enemies, but the darkness within. The ceasefire offer was not an easy decision. Arya convened a war council, bringing together the brightest minds of the Iron Armada and her political advisors. As the council convened, tensions were high. Everyone knew that the rebellion couldn't be allowed to fester, but there were differing opinions on how to proceed. We can't allow them to walk away from this unscathed, General Kalen Court, a grizzled veteran of the First Human Wars, argued. The Spectre is a traitor, a symbol of everything we fought against. If we give him a seat at the table, we're legitimizing his cause. We'll be playing into his hands. But President Elias Ward, though just as battle-hardened, took a more tempered approach. If we crush the Spectre without even offering him a chance to explain himself, we risk making martyrs of his followers. This rebellion isn't just about the Spectre, it's about a belief, an ideology. And we can't ignore that. We have to take the higher ground. The room fell silent. Arya could feel the weight of their words. The decision would define humanity's future. We won't give him a seat at the table, Arya finally said, her voice steady. But we will listen. We will hear him out. If his goal is truly peace, we will explore it. But make no mistake, we will be watching every move he makes. If he is truly committed to tearing down what we've built, he'll find that humanity doesn't bend. But if there's even a chance that he can be reasoned with, we owe it to ourselves and the galaxy to try. The council members nodded, some reluctantly, others resolute. As the meeting adjourned, Arya felt the weight of their collective decision settle in her chest. The coming days would be critical. The ceasefire was just a momentary pause in a much larger conflict, and Arya knew that the galaxy would not let humanity's rise go unchallenged. The ultimate battle was not just for the stars, it was for the very soul of the human race. And that battle was far from over. Humanity's fleet moved cautiously, prepared for a storm that threatened to break at any moment. The ceasefire with the Spectres faction was holding, for now. The rebels, their power fragmented after the defeat on Thaler, had agreed to pause hostilities in exchange for a meeting. Arya Moore, though she still harbored deep reservations, understood that this was a critical moment. Humanity could not afford to squander the opportunity for dialogue, not when the galaxy was watching. The Vanguard entered the rebel-controlled system, and Arya knew the stakes had never been higher. This ceasefire would test the very foundations of humanity's rise. Would they remain true to the ideals that had driven them, or would they allow themselves to be swayed by the call for power, the temptation to dominate? The outcome of this meeting would decide not just humanity's future, but the future of the galaxy itself. The Spectres' forces had chosen a neutral location for the talks, a barren moon orbiting a gas giant, far from the prying eyes of the galactic Concord. It was a place where both sides could meet without the shadow of war looming over them. The humans arrived first, the Vanguard and its fleet parked in the cold vacuum of space, waiting for the rebels to arrive. Arya paced in her quarters aboard the Vanguard, her mind working through every possible scenario. The Spectre had proven himself a formidable enemy. He was a master manipulator, using propaganda and clever tactics to turn the hearts and minds of the oppressed against humanity. But there was more to him than just a rebel leader. He was a man who saw the galaxy in black and white, a man who believed that the only way to fix the galaxy's ills was through revolution, no matter the cost. "Captain Moore, the Spectre's fleet is approaching," came the voice of Commander Devereaux, interrupting her thoughts. "Understood," Arya replied. "Prepare for the meeting. I want everyone on high alert. We're not here to make concessions, we're here to protect humanity's vision of the future." As the rebel ships dropped out of hyperspace, Arya's gaze shifted to the holographic display. The Spectre's flagship, a massive vessel named the Revolution, emerged from the void. It was an imposing sight, scarred from battle but still a symbol of defiance. The ship's dark silhouette against the backdrop of the gas giant felt like an omen. A transmission request came through. Arya accepted, and the face of the Spectre appeared on the holoscreen. His eyes were cold, but there was a trace of respect in his expression. "Captain Moore," he greeted her, his voice smooth but laced with underlying tension. "I trust you've come with an open mind." Arya met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I've come to listen. But understand this, the moment you betray this ceasefire, you will have no allies. Humanity will not bend to threats. This ends on our terms, or not at all." The Spectre chuckled softly, his lips curling into a knowing smile. "I've heard the same from many before you, Captain. But the galaxy is a different place now. The old powers are crumbling. The Concord is weak. The people are restless. Change is coming, whether you're ready for it or not." Arya's voice hardened. "We didn't conquer the galaxy to become the next empire. We're here to unite it, to end the cycle of violence and oppression. But that requires cooperation, not revolution." The Spectre's gaze shifted, a flicker of something darker in his eyes. "Cooperation?" he mused. "You think you can maintain your empire through peace? You think the Concord will just stand by and let you lead? Power is taken, Captain, not given. And you're no different from the tyrants who came before you." The words stung, but Arya held her ground. "We're not the same. Humanity won't rule with an iron fist. We'll build alliances, not subjugate worlds." There was a long pause, the silence between them heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, the Spectre spoke again, his tone less confrontational but still resolute. "I didn't come here to argue with you, Captain. I came because I believe there's still a chance for humanity to avoid the same fate as the empires that came before you. You want unity? Then prove it. Tear down the walls between us, and let me help guide your people toward true freedom. Let us build something new, together." Arya's mind raced. She could sense the sincerity in the Spectre's voice, but she also knew the danger of giving in to his vision. The price of unity, as he defined it, could mean the end of everything humanity had fought for. To follow him would be to abandon the very ideals that had made their conquest possible. But something inside her stirred. Was there room for negotiation? Was there a way to bring peace without sacrificing the future humanity had worked so hard to create? Before she could respond, Devereaux's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, we've intercepted a transmission from the Galactic Concord. They're mobilizing forces near our position. It seems they're not as convinced by the ceasefire as we are." Aria's heart sank. The Concord's intervention could turn this fragile moment of peace into a full-blown war. The timing couldn't have been worse. "I knew it," Aria muttered under her breath. "The Concord won't let us rise without a fight. They've already made their move." The Spectre's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as the news reached him. "So, it begins. The old powers will not give up their control easily. You're caught in the middle, Captain. And the galaxy will burn before they let you go unchallenged." The stakes had just escalated. Aria knew that humanity now faced an impossible choice. Would they continue their fight for peace, or would they be forced to crush the rebellion once and for all, securing their hold over the galaxy at any cost? "Prepare for a response," Aria ordered, her voice calm but determined. "We're not letting the Concord dictate our future. And we're not letting the Spectre's rebellion tear us apart. We'll meet force with force if we have to, but humanity's future will not be determined by anyone but us." As the meeting ended, Aria realized that the path ahead would be even more perilous. The galaxy was watching, and every decision, every move, would have lasting consequences. Unity or division? Peace or war? Humanity's fate hung in the balance, and only time would reveal which direction they would take. The galaxy stood on the precipice of a new age, and the coming days would decide its future. Humanity's dream of unity was being tested like never before. The rebellion, though fractured, still posed a deadly threat, and now the Galactic Concord had entered the fray. The choices Aria Moore made in the coming hours would either cement humanity's place as the galaxy's new power or shatter it under the weight of war. The Vanguard hovered in the cold silence of space, its hull reflecting the harsh light of distant stars. Aria stood alone on the bridge, staring out at the vast expanse. The rebel ceasefire had held for only a brief moment, and now the galaxy was once again caught in the grip of conflict. The Spectre had made his offer, but it was clear that his vision of freedom came at a cost humanity could not afford. His idea of unity was the overthrow of everything humanity had fought to build, a return to the chaos of rebellion, where the powerful ruled by force and the weak lived in fear. In response, the Galactic Concord had mobilized. Their fleet, vast and well-coordinated, was moving toward the human-controlled territories with the goal of crushing humanity's rise before it could become a real threat. Aria knew that a war on two fronts was impossible to win, but she also knew that humanity's survival depended on it. The rebellion could be put down, but only if they could survive the storm the Concord was bringing. "Captain," came the voice of Commander Devereaux, his tone grim. "The Concord fleet has reached the outer rim. They're advancing toward the core systems. We'll be in range within hours." Aria's eyes narrowed. The clock was ticking. "We can't fight them both. The rebellion is a symptom, not the disease. If we focus too much on the rebels, the Concord will crush us before we can regroup." Devereaux nodded. "So, we have to decide where to strike first." Aria took a deep breath. Her mind raced through the options, the risks. The Spectre's forces were weak, divided, but dangerous in their desperation. The Concord, on the other hand, was a formidable force, a remnant of the old empire that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. It was a war machine built for domination, not negotiation. Her decision was clear. "We will deal with the Spectre first. A final strike. After that, we'll turn our full attention to the Concord." She knew the cost of this choice. The rebellion had spread its influence across several key worlds. If the Spectre was left unchecked, he could rally the discontented and ignite another full-scale war, a war humanity wasn't prepared to fight on top of their struggle with the Concord. But by striking the rebellion first, humanity could secure its power and resources before the full weight of the Concord could be brought to bear. As the vanguard and its fleet moved to engage the rebel forces, Aria's thoughts turned to the Spectre. He had fought for his vision of freedom, just as humanity had fought for its own. But in the end, he was no different from the old empires they had replaced. His revolution would lead only to more bloodshed, more tyranny. There was no room for compromise, no room for weakness. Humanity had to survive, no matter the cost. The final battle took place on Dranox, a barren world on the edge of the system. The Spectre's fleet, though outnumbered, was well equipped, and his forces fought with the fervor of those who believed they had nothing left to lose. But humanity's military might was overwhelming. The battle raged across the planet's surface, the skies darkened by smoke and fire as ships collided, soldiers clashed, and the cries of battle echoed across the desolate world. Aria stood on the command deck of the Vanguard, watching as her fleet tore through the rebel defenses. The Spectre's forces, though skilled and desperate, were no match for the might of humanity's military. She could hear the sounds of victory in the comms, but there was no joy in her heart. This was a war for survival, not conquest. There was no glory in destroying the dream of a man who had believed he could free the galaxy by force. In the midst of the chaos, Aria made her way to the command center. She knew the time had come to face the Spectre himself. As the rebel flagship Revolution loomed on the horizon, Aria ordered a boarding operation. Her best soldiers, led by Commander Devereaux, would board the ship and bring the Spectre to justice. It wasn't long before they made contact. The Spectre, as expected, was not a coward. He was ready for this final confrontation. He stood at the heart of his ship, his cold eyes fixed on the human soldiers that had come for him. "Do you think you've won, Captain Moore?" he sneered as Aria entered the room, her face expressionless. "You think you've defeated me, defeated the cause I represent? The rebellion will continue, even without me." Aria's voice was quiet but resolute. "It doesn't have to end like this. You could have joined us. Together, we could have forged a future where the galaxy was united, not divided by war and hatred." The Spectre laughed bitterly. "You'll never understand, will you? You're just like the rest of them, only interested in power. You think you've built something better, but all you've done is replace one empire with another. You'll fall the same way they did." "I don't think so," Aria said firmly, her eyes locked on his. "Humanity isn't interested in ruling the galaxy. We're interested in uniting it. And if that means we have to fight, we will." With a sudden movement, she signaled her soldiers to arrest him. The Spectre struggled, but he was no match for the combined force of humanity's finest. He was taken into custody, and the rebellion, without its leader, quickly crumbled. The war with the Spectre was over, but the fight with the Concord was just beginning. As the Vanguard prepared to face the might of the Galactic Concord, Aria knew that humanity's future was still uncertain. But one thing was clear: the path to unity would be fraught with challenges. The galaxy would not be easily tamed. Yet humanity had proven something vital: it was no longer just a fleeting power. It was a force that had learned to survive, to endure. And it was prepared to fight for its place among the stars.